Sure you don't want to zoom in close? I guess it doesn't matter.
No, this is a good angle.
Okay.
This is awful. We're not gonna Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today's video is a long-awaited video with my mom. We have not done a video together since that period video.
Right.
Which was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yes.
And so today's video is going to be my mom answering questions about boys, relationships, and heartbreak that you would be too afraid to ask your own mom because my mom is the most real, open person ever. So we're gonna be filming that. You guys asked a lot of questions. Hey guys, Editing Ruby here. Just popping in really quickly to say that originally when my mom and I filmed this, we wanted it to be one video. However, all the footage ended up being way too long to be one video. It was like over an hour uncut. So I decided to divide this whole video into 2 parts so that you guys get to hear all of the advice that my mom gave and I don't have to like cut anything out. So this is gonna be part 1 and then stay tuned for part 2. Anyway, back to the main part of the video. Anything you want to say before we start the video?
I think that it's really, really important that if something's bothering you or you have questions about anything, that you express yourself and communicate with someone that feels safe to you, who you also think you can share your innermost secrets and thoughts with and know that you're not going to be judged and they're there to try to help offer support and guidance.
Yeah, exactly. And we're like the Gilmore Girls, so
yeah. we tell each other everything.
We tell each other everything,
Yeah,
and so I thought that my mom could help you guys with some of the similar things I've asked her, but put it on my channel.
Yeah,
I need to have a disclaimer.
Smart. I'm gonna have my disclaimer. Obviously, I'm not a professional. I'm not a therapist. This is not my line of work. I'm just a mom who's trying to help, you know, guide her daughter as best I can
and give the advice to you guys.
You know, every situation is different, and I don't know any of you, so whatever I say, this is just my opinion.
Let's start with, do you want to share a little of like your own background in terms of dealing with guys, relationships, or heartbreak?
I mean, I remember my first crushes being very young. Like, I think even when I was 6 years old, I had a crush on this guy. I still remember, I just remember thinking he was so cute, and I was, I think, 7, maybe 6, and I went up to him and I said, "Will you marry me when you're older?" And he went, "Ew, and he like ran away from me, and that was my first heartbreak, actually. I was like totally rejected by him, and then years later we became friends and we laughed about it. It's normal to, throughout all those different ages and years that you're in school, you'll probably have a roller coaster of crushes where you're interested in somebody, they may not be interested in you, or vice versa, and you know, it's not always reciprocated. I always was of the mind of it's better to regret something that you did rather than something you didn't do. So if I liked somebody or had a crush on somebody, I would, you know, do little things like try to have conversations with them, flirt as much as a person in middle school can flirt, but like, you know, talk and be fun and become friends. That's sometimes a really good way to get to know somebody, obviously. My first real actual relationship was in high school, and I think I had a crush on him for grade 10 and 11, and we were friends and we were in the same friends group, but he always seemed to be interested in somebody else, so I was just constantly heartbroken. And I did have a few guys that liked me, but he was the only one that I was interested in. And then in grade 12, ding ding ding, he liked me and we got involved, and he was my first real boyfriend. We were together all through grade 12 and 13, but it was not all smooth sailing. It was rocky at times. There were all these other people involved because we were friends with a group, so sometimes things would get back to me that he said about me, and sometimes he would hear, you know, it's just typical high school drama and stuff that went on. You know, when I look back, I can't even believe all the stuff I've learned since then and what I thought I knew then, but it was good for what it was, and it taught me a lot about relationships, and high school boys and girls are still learning. It's a learning process.
So basically, for that background, she knows heartbreak, she understands.
Yes. Oh boy, do I ever.
Ride of relationships.
The good times would last a little while, and then something would happen and we'd have like an argument or a disagreement. I also didn't feel ready, and maybe this is TMI, but I didn't want to lose my virginity that quickly. I wanted to take things really, really slow, and from all I knew of him and my other high school boy friends, like friends who were boys, they really wanted to, you know, eventually have sex. They were sometimes at a different pace than a lot of my girlfriends and I, and a lot of people broke up because the girl, or sometimes the guy, wasn't willing to progress to a further stage in the sexual relationship.
Because we got a lot of questions about this, so let's just jump right into the juicy stuff. How to know if you're ready to do certain things and how to deal with being pressured by guys.
Okay, first of all, and I really mean this with all my heart, do not do anything until you you are really super secure and comfortable in the relationship. And that could take a long time. Don't feel like, oh, everybody's doing it, so I should be. Absolutely not. The worst thing you can do is go into a physical relationship with somebody before you're ready. That means ready on so many levels, not just physically, emotionally, mentally. I don't think that anybody, especially at that age, should rush into things. Really take the time to get to know the person. If you're doing it because you feel pressure, 100% I can tell you that is the reason to not do it. If there's pressure, if you're not sure about how the person feels about you, whatever the situation is, there should be a true mutual love and respect. And at a high school age, that often is not the case. I can't tell you how many friends of mine or just people I knew gave it all away, and then the next day their partner was gone, interested in somebody else, or they found out they were cheating on them. It's brutal. A lot of people learn it the hard way. I definitely would not recommend doing anything before you really are sure and secure with that person. That requires time spent together. That requires conversations about it. If somebody that you're attracted to is trying to go further than you've agreed upon, then you have to stop and say, you know, this isn't what we talked about. And the reality is that you need to really know who you're with and get to know them really well. A lot of people save it until they're older, until they're married. I don't necessarily think you have to be married, but I do think you have to be in a long-term committed relationship. You know, I'm not talking about kissing. Kissing, you know, that's, you can kiss somebody. I'm talking about actually having intercourse with somebody or going further than, you know, light fooling
like
around.
The bases.
The bases. I don't even know what the bases are anymore, but the bases when I grew up, you want to stick around first base for a long time. Kissing is great, holding hands, getting to know somebody physically that way. And by the way, if they don't feel it's moving fast enough for them, then they're just pressuring you to do something that you're not ready for, and that's disrespectful. It's also a sign that they're looking for something that's quick. Not always, like every situation is different, but you really have to know that you can trust them, because the worst feeling in the world is when you've given away that part of yourself to intimacy and then shortly thereafter find out they didn't feel the same way or they were just using you. So I say take your time.
And then we got a lot of questions about how to know if someone likes you, what typically the signs seem to be. Like,
well, I mean, a lot of the times it's obvious. I guess I'm looking at it from a perspective of an adult where people are more direct, but you know, still even like, you know, in my 20s and 30s, people don't always know when someone's actually interested versus just friendly conversation. Obviously there's where they actually tell you I like you or I want to go out with you or whatever, but some of the signs are, a lot of it is that they want to be around you. Somehow they're always showing up, whether they're phoning you, texting you, or making an effort to get to know you, genuinely interested in what you have to say, making good eye contact, smiling, almost giddy and happy when they're around you, maybe asking you a lot of questions, really listening to what you say. And if it takes place over a period of time, then they remember the things you say and maybe bring them up again in the future. Physically, it's often like they'll want to be close to you. Maybe they reach out and touch your arm, or little things that are kind of innocent but like still show that they find you attractive.
I feel like when you know, like that's the thing.
Yeah,
I feel like
it's true.
if you even really are questioning it, it's probably,
yes.
But at the same time that could be just being delusional. But
it's not one thing, it's sort of a combination of things. It's the way they look at you, but genuinely it's sort of different than just plain friendships. You know what those are, but where someone gets a little glint in their eye when they're talking to you, you can tell when someone's genuinely interested in you. They'll make the effort.
Like, yeah, being like nonchalant.
Yeah.
And then another question is like, what ages are good for like first boyfriend or like dating or first kiss, just like in your opinion?
It's different nowadays, I think, than when I grew up, because when I grew up, like I do remember going to camp and I was probably 14 and there were kids who were meeting at the rock and maybe kissing a bit. Like at 14, I don't know if many people were even kissing, maybe even 13. We definitely were very innocent. Nowadays, I hear all these stories and I can't believe what goes on at such a young age. I personally think it's too young.
I always say high school. Like once you're in high school, then things become more fun.
I agree. Anything less than high school, like anything younger than 15, and even 15 is still young. And believe me when I say this, because when you get older and you look back, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I was so young then and I felt like I knew everything. Yeah. You're still learning. You've just gotten out of middle school. That's still young. Middle school, I mean, you know, there are people who say
but like by boyfriend, what I always also say is by boyfriend, what do you mean by that?
I mean, it could be holding hands.
Exactly. Like
going to a movie together, going out to eat together. In older generations, like my parents met when they were, I think, 15, and they ended up getting married.
Yeah, but things were also different, and now everybody just wants to hook
No,
up.
I agree. And hookup in those days is different than it is now. Everything has changed, but I still think that one thing has remained the same, and that is you should take your time to get to know somebody before you become more intimately involved with them.
Because I also think everyone's gonna be different. Like, if you've, for example, been friends with a guy your whole childhood and then you guys are 13, that's obviously different.
I agree.
Everything's different.
No, holding hands, a little bit of kissing, that's fine. Anything that goes beyond that, I think you need to be a little older.
Later into high school.
Later into high school, when you really have learned, hopefully your high school has some form of, you know, do they call it sex ed
health?
now? Okay, health education.
Yeah, you have to be educated.
You do have to be educated.
Like,
you have to know about how your bodies work. A lot of people aren't educated about their bodies and they don't know how things work, and that's where dangerous outcomes can ensue. You don't want an unwanted pregnancy. You don't want to be hurt or assaulted. Be careful, be aware.
And it also takes two people being on the same page, and the problem is that often they're not.
I agree.
Like,
I agree.
It has to be the mutual, like, both wanting and no
that's
like pressure or anything.
And that takes time to know.
So our next question is, because obviously we got a ton just on how to get over a guy, a breakup, moving on, heartbreak, all of that. So if you want to talk about that.
You're never going to be able to avoid getting hurt. That's just part of the process. Breakups happen. It's very rare that you stay with the person that you've been with since you were, like, let's say in high school. The heartache is real. I can't tell you how many times, even over this one relationship I had in high school where we broke up and I would just drive or walk and listen to music. In those days it was on my Walkman. It was like totally different than what you guys have today. I would listen to like all these songs and like cry my heart out and talk to my friends, and we'd all get together and we'd be going through heartache at different times, and like I remember being so obsessed with it. That was all I could think about. Then we would get back together and then things weren't great again, and I almost would prefer to have been back together when things weren't going well than to be heartbroken. Here's the thing that I've learned, or that I, you know, experienced a lot when I was younger. It's really weird. A relationship, let's say, you know, it starts off great and everything's good, but then, you know, you get to know each other, you start to realize you've got some differences. You don't want to let go of something that was so good, and you keep trying to sort of get back to how it was in the beginning because it was so great. But for whatever reason, there's a million reasons why, but let's just say it's not working out. Sometimes it's mutual and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you get broken up with, sometimes you're the one doing the breaking up. But no matter what, for some reason, once you break up, I have found, and I know so many people who've gone through this, the second it's over, it's like this switch gets turned and all you can think about, what runs through your mind, almost like a movie, are all the good memories and the good moments. Suddenly they're the greatest person ever and you glorify them, and you've got this constant stream of the happy times and the good times going through your head. All the bad stuff was forgotten. And even though you know there was stuff that wasn't good and you know there are reasons that you're not together, it could be something as bad as the person cheated on you or lied to you, and you still, your brain just keeps glorifying them, and you listen to music and you get sad and you dream about them and you wake up and you're like, oh, you know, and all you want is to either get back together, have another chance with them. It's weird. Part of it is just, it's grief, it's loss. That's really hard to deal with. You've invested time in somebody. Often there's time invested even before you actually have a relationship because you've been interested or they've been interested. The longer you've been together, sometimes the harder it is. You know, sometimes it's the opposite of that. Sometimes you only had a short time with somebody and you wanted more, but they didn't. And, you know, whatever the case, that glorifying the montage of all the great events, like you see in a movie where it's like they show, you know, the montage of all the happiness
your head
with set to music. It's crazy, and it is very real. Try to distract yourself, like get busy, whatever you can think of to do. If you had been neglecting yourself in the relationship and sort of putting all your hobbies and interests aside, go out and try to explore that again. Get to know yourself again. Spend time with your friends, spend time with your family, talk to people. It's so important to talk about it. Get another person's support, whoever that person may be, whether it's your best friend
or your mother,
or a
because
parent.
she's helped me through my fair share of heartbreak, as you guys already know on my channel.
I try, but it broke my heart when Ruby was going through her breakup because I knew there was only so much I could do. She just had to go through it. There were many times that we sat on the couch and she cried and I held her hand. By the time, it just feels like it's never gonna feel better. It's never gonna get better, but
it gets better.
And that's what I was gonna say. No matter what, time passes and eventually it does get better.
It's true. Like, even if you were to lie there and just cry, eventually you won't. Like,
time needs to pass. You need to gain perspective, and also eventually, and this is what you really need to know, there will be somebody else. Ruby, like, she was like,
never, there will never be
There will be lots of people, because you're so young at this age. It's like your lives are just starting. Your experience in history and relationships is just at the beginning, and each experience is a learning experience. Even if the relationship doesn't last, it was still meant to be at that time, for that time. That was what was meant to happen. And I know it's hard to imagine, but when you get older and look back and you think, oh gosh, that's why that happened. There are so many people that look back and they say, I'm so glad that relationship didn't work out because I ended up finding the love of my life.
You just have to give it time. It really is true.
Oh yeah, and teenage angst is the worst. Like, as you get older, you learn more. It's not to say that when things don't work out, it's any easier. There are people who get divorced in their 50s and 60s, and it's devastating. Loss is loss.
Yeah, you also said something to me once that was really true, and it's like, the pain you're feeling isn't specific to this person. You're gonna feel it again and again, and it's true, that heartbreak, it's just a feeling, like sadness or happiness. It's not directly always correlated to that person. You're gonna experience it in many situations over and over again.
And there are many reasons that relationships come and go, both friendships and romantic relationships. Change is part of life. You know, in every aspect of life, it's all about change, and it's hard.
Next question. There were a few questions on what to do if a boyfriend is still close with his ex or talking to his ex.
I always find that that's a bit of a red flag.
Yeah.
What you have to do though in this type of situation is not judge, because everybody's been there where they've ended a relationship and they're still not completely over that person, but they start to venture out and put their feelings
drag
out,
other people
and other people get dragged into the drama. It's happened with me definitely, where actually I've gotten involved with somebody who was also getting over somebody. We were both sort of in transition. That was kind of the glue that bound us together, was that we could relate to each other's grief over losing our last relationship. Ultimately, that relationship served its purpose because it helped bridge the gap, but it's a difficult thing to deal with because you know that person's still very much on their mind. For all you know, they're comparing you to that person. It doesn't feel good. If they have unresolved issues where they're still maybe interested in trying to get back together with that person, and you sense that,
and then you feel used.
Then, or maybe their intentions are good, they just can't help it. They can't get over that person, and maybe they do ultimately end up getting back together with that person. And if that's what's meant to happen, then that's great for them, but you can end up getting hurt. The only thing I can suggest is, again, it all goes back to communication. Ask them about it, talk about it, tell them you're there to just learn about them. You're not judging them. You just want to know how they feel, and you want to get to the truth. It really is communication and honesty. It is, but like, you know what? It's a lot to ask at this age sometimes. I mean, like in a high school situation, not everybody is great at communicating, and they're not open, and people get hurt. And this is a scenario that plays itself out again and again. It's also possible that there are people where you're interested in multiple people at the same time. It's not always the case where there's just one. You can be, you know, especially in high school, right? I don't think there's anything wrong at a young age of saying, I don't want to be in a committed relationship.
It's about being upfront about it.
Exactly, because that's the bottom line. Everybody should just be upfront about what they're looking for, and that is in an ideal world. I know it's not going to happen, but you can take charge personally and know that you're going to do your best to try to communicate and be expressive about what your intentions are and about wanting to know what their intentions are. That's the best you can do. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's going to make mistakes. Everybody's just learning, especially in high school. I'm not saying that things like cheating or lying should be forgiven.
That's what happens.
And it does happen all the time, and it's part of the learning process. So many people, the stuff they do in high school and even in university, they look back as mature adults, sometimes call the person and say, I can't believe I did that to you. You know, I look back and I can't believe it. I don't know what I was thinking. A lot of the time it's just immaturity, hormones, adolescence. It's part of learning. It does all come down to communication. And also not being judgmental, like I said, because, you know, let's say, you know, person A has an interest in several different, you know, person B, person C, person D. If person A is being deceitful, being involved with all of B, C, and D at the same time, and they eventually find out, which, by the way, the truth usually comes out.
The truth always comes out. No matter how much time it takes, the truth always comes out. The truth eventually
usually comes out. When there's a big group of people involved, like in a high school situation where everybody kind of knows each other or knows someone that knows someone, eventually, like what happened with Ruby, you find out if someone cares about you enough to say, hey, by the way, I know you think you're in a committed relationship with this person, but this is what's happening. And also in my day, we didn't have the kind of proof that there is these days. Like, we didn't have cell phones. Nowadays, everything is traceable on text. People screenshot. Let's say you find out that somebody has been cheating on you or lying to you. Within 5 minutes, it can spread around
the whole school.
Through the whole school. Everything is traceable. It's a different world. Like, you can't get away with stuff the way you used to, and social media just compounds that. You know, it's like, oh, you said you were home tonight, but someone took a picture of you at a party.
Locations now.
Oh yeah. Like, or like, you said you weren't feeling well, and yet there's a story on so-and-so's Instagram that shows that you're at the beach cuddling up with some other girl. It's a crazy different world now.
Yeah.
Make sure to stick around on my channel to see part 2 of my mom answering these questions that you guys asked, because there are a ton more on tons more topics in the next part coming soon. And I love you guys so much, and I really hope that you enjoyed this part 1, and I'm so excited for you guys to see part 2. Mwah. I love you guys.